Professional sports teams in the major sports exist in a rarefied air. They have become extremely valuable businesses, capturing revenue through ticket sales, sponsorships, and extremely lucrative media rights deals, among other things. Their value is also driven by scarcity. New ice cream shops open every day, but there's only 30 NBA teams. So it should come as no surprise that when the opportunity to buy one comes calling, someone will answer. Today, we're talking about the fight for ownership of the Minnesota Timberwolves. So let's dive in and find out what happens when good deals go bad. Glen Taylor has been the owner of the Minnesota Timberwolves since 1994. After making his fortune in wedding invitations, Glen set out for the big time. He bought the Wolves for $88 million, and apparently even had a somewhat noble motivation for doing it. As a Minnesota native, he bought the team to keep it from moving to New Orleans. But that's where the Glen good vibes end. Glen Taylor is not generally well regarded as an NBA owner. But what does that mean? To find out, I went to that beacon of academia, that bastion of scholarship, that elite echelon of enlightenment. I went to Reddit, and boy did Reddit have a lot to say. Glen Taylor paid Joe Smith under the table, causing us to lose picks during Kevin Garnett's prime, amongst a million other bad moves. Minnesota signed Smith to a free agent contract in 1999, with the secret promise of $86 million over 7 years after that, a salary cap violation. The NBA punished the Wolves by taking away their next 5 first-round draft picks and fining them $3.5 million, a league record. Basically, Glen tried to get around the rules on how much an NBA team can spend on players with an under-the-table deal. A guy willing to break rules that he knows about and has agreed to follow. Interesting. Glen Taylor did 3 good things, unironically, and everything else was bad. Owner set the tone for culture. He ran the place like a country club. The Timberwolves performed so badly during his tenure, due directly to his GM hiring. By many objective measures, win percentage, playoff appearances, Taylor is the worst owner in the history of sports. He's awful, an awful person, a ghoul. Oof, glad they're not talking about me. And it's not just the fans. Timberwolves legend Kevin Garnett didn't have anything good to say about Glen Taylor in 2021. Garnett famously refused to participate in any jersey retirement ceremony with the Wolves, as he had done with the Celtics. KG had a verbal understanding with Taylor and Flip Saunders that KG and Flip would either become a part of ownership or work in the front office after KG retired. After Flip Saunders passed away, it appears Taylor did a rug pull and that deal went bye-bye. When Garnett was asked about it, he told Shams Charania, "Glen and I had an understanding before Flip died, and when Flip died, that understanding went with Flip. For that, I won't forgive Glen. I thought he was a straight-up person, straight-up businessman, and when Flip died, everything went with him. At this point, I don't want any dealings with Glen Taylor or Taylor Corp, or anything that has to do with him. I'll always have a special place in my heart for the city of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota in my heart, but I don't do business with snakes." Quick sidebar. Oral contracts and verbal deals, don't do that. So Glen likes a rug pull, good to know. Probably an isolated incident. Nobody would try a rug pull twice, right? You have to be some kind of alleged snake to do that. And when you're navigating business deals with people, snakes, or people alleged to be snakes, you're gonna wanna know a great lawyer. Now, if you could only know one lawyer, Thurgood Marshall would have been a great one. But since you can know 2, subscribe. The year is 2021. Glen Taylor has owned the Timberwolves for 27 years. He starts thinking about the future of the team and who could succeed him. Enter Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry, 2 young, completely unfamous, regular Joe, middle-class upstarts looking to take part in the American dream. Their idea? Buy a business and build it up to be even stronger. The business? The Minnesota Timberwolves. Taylor's plan was to bring in partners that could become minority owners of the Timberwolves and that he could mentor over the course of a few years. Previous prospective buyers Taylor had met before Rodriguez and Lowry were not interested in this arrangement, as most wanted immediate control. This presented an opportunity for Lowry and Rodriguez to be mentored by Taylor and learn about the league, gradually taking control. The 3 didn't know each other before the deal, but seemed to have taken a liking to each other over burgers at Taylor's home. The 3 and their teams hammered out a deal after that. When you buy a business, there's all kinds of dials we can turn to create the right combination of conditions that maximize value. These can relate to deal structure, payment terms, timing, and more. The Wolves sale was structured as a phased equity buyout, or step transaction. I'll explain equity purchases versus asset purchases in a later video. But for now, think of a company traded on the stock market. Now think of an equity purchase as buying all of the stock in that company. The Rodriguez-Lori ownership group entered a deal to buy the Wolves from Glen Taylor through an equity purchase. But rather than buying it all outright, they turned the dial to adjust the deal's timing. The solution? A phased buyout, which means buying the business in pieces. The deal was that they would buy some of the ownership interest now, immediately becoming minority owners. Then later, they'd buy a little more, and then a little more, until they became the complete owners. Longer sidebar. You might hear people clown Rodriguez and Lori for buying the Wolves on a layaway or through an installment plan, but that's not quite what happened here. A phased buyout is not the same thing as a purchase with installment payments or layaway. When you buy something in installments, a business, a house, or a car, for example, you purchase 100% of the asset and become its owner immediately. You promise to make payments toward the purchase price. It's the payments that happen over time, not the acquisition. In a phased buyout or step transaction, the acquisition happens over time. If I was buying your house in phases, maybe I'd buy the backyard, then a bit later, I'd buy the detached garage, then finally I'd buy the actual house. I'm not saying that's a good idea, but I just want you to see how it works. I acquire the ownership piece by piece. Phased buyouts are not an automatic no-no. They can be very useful for getting a deal that works for everyone. A phased buyout can help a buyer by eliminating the potentially huge financial strain caused by an immediate lump sum payment or the debt service that would be required with a loan. It can also help facilitate and incentivize the seller's continued involvement in the business. When you buy a business, you typically need the seller to be involved in transitioning that business to you in some capacity. The seller has know-how, key relationships, and more. If the seller is able to financially participate in the upside of a smooth transition, because they'll still own a piece of the business, and would presumably get distributions of profits during that time, they might want to help a bit more than they otherwise would. Those benefits can help the seller too. This is exactly what it seemed Glen Taylor wanted, the opportunity to stay involved in the company and mentor the new owners. The plan was for Rodriguez and Lori to purchase the Wolves through smaller transactions called tranches. The first tranche was a 20% stake, purchased in the 2021 closing of the deal. From there, the buyers had call options to buy additional stakes. They could purchase another 20%, then another 40%, and then the final 20%. Each of these had their own specific timings and purchase prices. At the time of purchase for each tranche, the buyer would make a new payment for the cost of that tranche. While the first two payments were made, the agreement faltered before the third payment. So what happened? Why did it falter? Well, our old buddy Glenn went back to the well with another rug pull. He did the thing he did before? I'm shocked! As Reddit users have tried to make very clear for us, Glen Taylor is not considered a great NBA owner. But as it turns out, Rodriguez and Lori weren't too bad. They made big plans, and using their position as minority owners being groomed to take over, they recruited Tim Connolly to lead the front office. They also made other key hires and were regularly present around the team. All of these moves, particularly bringing in Connolly, a well-regarded basketball executive who built the champion Denver Nuggets, had a big effect. The team got better. After watching the team rise, it seems Glenn did not like the idea of someone else being in the driver's seat and receiving all of the credit now that the team was actually good. Never mind that the moves the new owners made were the reason the team was good. Yeah, that sounds right to me. He also didn't like that the Wolves' new success meant the team valuation had jumped from $1.5 billion that he had sold it for to a whopping $3.1 billion just 3 years later. Also, never mind that the new owners' moves drove that increase in value. Yep. I see nothing wrong with that. So Glenn decides the deal is off. His official reason? Lori and Rodriguez don't have the cash to make payment for the tranche. They're late on payment, so the deal's off. Smells like broke boys in here. The buyers weren't about to take that line down though, and the fight moved on to arbitration. Taylor likely had another big motivation on his timing for killing the deal. The Minnesota Timberwolves are actually held as a limited partnership, not as a corporation or LLC as business owners are likely more familiar with. You see, in the first purchase and the first option purchase, Rodriguez and Lori acquired 40% of the company in the form of limited partnership interest. A limited partnership works a bit differently than corporations and LLCs. A limited partnership features at least two partners. One or more are the general partners and one or more are the limited. You have to have at least one of each. The general partner runs the business. It makes the decisions and then acts on them. It's the only one of the partners that's empowered to conduct company business in any capacity. It's the one driving the car. A limited partner is a passenger. It'll get wherever the driver takes them, but they're more along for the ride and benefiting from the general partner's decisions. A limited partner's rights are mostly to participate in the financial benefits of ownership. They can't manage, act for, or otherwise participate in the business. It's a passive investment, where you may have some right to advise the general partner and be heard, but not much else. The upcoming tranche in the Wolves deal involved Rodriguez and Lori finally buying the general partnership interest in the Wolves. This would mean they were now in control of the company. By killing the deal now, Taylor was trying to trap them in the passenger seat when they had signed on to be the driver. With that, the parties began dispute resolution. First they tried mediation, that didn't work. So then they moved on to arbitration. Arbitration is a private dispute resolution process where, much like court, each side presents their legal arguments and evidence to a neutral decision maker who then makes a binding ruling on the parties. The stakes were high here. If the arbitrator's ruling favored Taylor, he would retain control of the Timberwolves. And Lori and Rodriguez would have two options, either remain as limited partners or exit the group. If Lori and Rodriguez prevailed, they could proceed with the team's acquisition. Now, because arbitration is a private process, we don't know exactly what the arbitrators decided for each of the legal arguments involved. But we can surmise that Section 6.4 of the purchase agreement was a big deal. That section controlled how a call option was exercised and the sale of the underlying tranche was closed. It said that an option's closing had to occur no later than 90 days after notice that the option would be exercised. Essentially, once the buyer said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and buy the tranche, they have to close within 90 days. But the agreement also said that 90-day period would be automatically extended if the NBA hadn't approved the purchase. Rodriguez and Lori had delivered their approval paperwork to the NBA within the required time frame. The NBA just hadn't gotten back to them yet. But under the agreement, that wasn't the buyer's problem. The arbitrators decided in a 2-to-1 vote that Glen Taylor must follow through on the agreement and transfer the tranche and control to Rodriguez and Lori. It probably didn't help that Taylor said in an interview with the Associated Press, "We went through the process and I spent a lot of time. We've got a really good team. We've got a lot of good things going for us. I enjoy it and I'm healthy enough to do this. I don't need the money, so I think I'll just keep running it and enjoying it. I like my coach, I like my staff. This way everybody keeps their jobs and I'll be happy." So what can we learn from this? Oh, pick me, pick me. Don't do business with snakes. Or alleged snakes. That's true. Get to know the parties to a transaction. A deal is not just assets or business, it's people. Understanding their motivations, their goals, their tendencies, their shortcomings allows you to create the best strategy to achieve your own goals. Through the due diligence process, Rodriguez, Lori, and their lawyers had likely become aware of some of Glen Taylor's proclivities and overall reputation, and in reviewing the agreement and designing it, they built some protections to protect themselves from bad behaviors. 2. Great contracts are about assigning risk of loss. Generally, you want to assign the risk of loss to the party able to control that risk. You don't want to be the one facing the consequences of risk if you can't control whether it happens. But in some cases, neither party controls it. In those situations, we want to come up with a fair allocation of the risk. Here, there was a risk that neither party could control. The NBA had to approve the sale of the tranche through the call option. And the NBA wasn't bound to act within anybody's time frame. To protect against that risk, the deal included an automatic extension of the timeline if the NBA was the real reason for any delay. 3. Business sales are anything but cookie cutter. There are countless ways to structure a deal that have subtle or straightforward impacts on the deal. A small tweak in one place can have a huge impact in another. The key is understanding how to make the right combination of tweaks to build the best deal for you. 4th, remember KG had an oral agreement to join ownership? Whether it's with Glen Taylor or your best friend, don't do that. Click here and I'll walk you through why.